Next slide, please. So participant microphones have been muted at entry. If you have any questions during the event, please use the chat. You will be able to unmute during the discussion portion. During the presentation, if you have any technical difficulties or questions about the topic, please use the chat box. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing at a later time on the Mhttc website. To reach us after the webinar, you can email newengland@mhttcnetwork.org. Next slide, please. This slide provides a description of our disclaimers for Mhttc. Next slide, please. The Mhttc network uses affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all activities. That language is strengths-based and hopeful, inclusive and accepting of diverse cultures, genders, perspectives, and experiences, healing-centered and trauma-responsive, inviting to individuals participating in their own journeys, person-first and free of labels, non-judgmental and avoiding assumptions, respectful, clear, and understandable, consistent with our actions, policies, and products. Next slide, please. With that, it is my pleasure to hand it over to Michelle for introductions.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our CSC Basics webinar today. Thank you so much for choosing to spend some time with us this afternoon. I'm really excited about our presenters today and to tell you a little bit about this program. So today is the 5th part of a 7-part monthly series that is being co-sponsored by the New England Mhttc and the National Early Psychosis Working Group of the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, as well as some of our partners from across the country who represent the 10 regional centers and 2 national centers from the Mhttc network, as well as some additional partners from outside of the Mhttc. The goal of this series is to provide a brief introduction to what coordinated specialty care for early psychosis is all about. The series is geared towards any individuals that are new to working on an early psychosis specialty team. This includes students, clinicians, prescribers, supported employment specialists, family clinicians, and peer specialists. Each of the 7 webinars will focus on a different topic and will be co-presented by a professional with expertise in that component of care, as well as individuals with expertise based on lived experience. And they will speak to how this aspect of care was meaningful in their journey towards recovery for themselves and their loved ones. The content from these webinars will be recorded and used for the development of an open source and freely available online course that will be available on a website called Healthy Knowledge. And the goal of this course is going to be helping out folks that are new to working in coordinated specialty care. So today's session, we have an overview of family psychoeducation and support, and we have 3 fantastic presenters. So I'm delighted to introduce, this is a list of some of the upcoming topics that we have going on. And I'm going to introduce Susan Gingrich, who is the training coordinator for the Navigate First Episode Psychosis Treatment Program. She has participated in Navigate training in 28 states. Susan is the co-author with Kim Muser of 5 books: Coping with Schizophrenia, Social Skills Training for Schizophrenia, The Coping Skills Group, The Complete Family Guide to Schizophrenia and Illness Management and Recovery, Personalized Skills Strategies for Those with Mental Illness. Helene Catherine Swearingen has served as an educator, on-call hospital chaplain, and as a board member for clinical research at Michigan State University's Biomedical Review Board. And Kurt Kirchhoff met Kathy's husband and met Kathy in seminary back in the 1980s And since then, he's worked as a floor layer, high school teacher, and a minister. But now he's retired and is just fine with that. He is also a lifetime avid fan of the St. Louis Cardinals. So welcome, Susan, Kathy, and Kurt. It's such a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And it's such a pleasure to be able to present with families, with the family who's been through a lot of the things that the family program are really designed to help with. So it's always good to hear, are they actually helpful, or in what way are they helpful? So Kathy and Kurt are so kind to co-present with me. First of all, just a little background is that the family clinician or the family education person or the family counselor, depends on what team you're on, what it might be called, but it's a required part of coordinated specialty care. There needs to be a family education program, and families need to be included when there is a coordinated specialty care team. And I've heard the question, well, why? Why are families so important? Why do we need a separate person or someone that focuses on the families? And one of the basic things to know is that family involvement improves the outcomes of individuals with psychosis. One of the major research that was done in the past 20 years shows that when families are involved, if you collect the studies that are comparing family involvement with programs that don't have family involvement, you see that when there is family involvement, it can cut relapse in half. And that's hugely important because we know relapses or return to symptoms can really distract someone from their life goals, from their ability to stay on track with things. So that's just one of the many things one of the many outcomes that is improved. And then the other question sometimes is, well, how do they help? What about what they're doing improves the outcome? And we think that it's important to know that families do so much to help with recovery and resilience. They're often are in a position where they might be living with the person or have a lot of contact, and they're the ones who are going to be encouraging the person to go to a treatment appointment. They're the ones who might even be giving them a ride to treatment. They're the ones who can help reduce the stress that the young person is under. They're the ones who can encourage goals in the moment. If someone's goal is to go back to school and they're hesitating one morning saying, I don't know, it's raining outside and I'm not feeling it today. It might be the families who say, I know how important you've told me going to school is. And would it help if I gave you a ride? Because I just know how important this is. They're the ones who can praise progress daily. When someone comes in to see us at the Coordinated Specialty Care Team, we see them maybe a few times a week. Well, the families are right there on the spot to provide encouragement. The client doesn't have to wait for a couple of days to get that kind of encouragement. Families are also in a position to discourage the use of alcohol and drugs. In some cases, alcohol and drugs have been the cause of relapse. And we know that families, again, they're there in the moment. And they're there to support the person having a healthy lifestyle. Families are there to see if there's early signs of relapse. If they know what to look for, they can see some of the early indications that a person is starting to have a return of symptoms. And the sooner we know about that on the coordinated specialty care team, the more we can take action. So that's another way that families are helpful. And then finally is that they're there to convey hope to the young person. They can carry the hope. And what we're going to talk about a little bit later is how we help the family feel the hope. And then the family also spreads that hope to the young person, that things don't, that there's possibility for a rich and rewarding life. And if that's what the family's conveying, that's what the client is going to be receiving on a daily basis. And when we were planning this webinar, Kurt and Kathy said that in a way, families are providing a wraparound of support. And I completely agree with that. And what we're here to do on the coordinated specialty care team is to kind of equip the family to provide that wraparound of support, because they have gone through a lot by the time they get to us, and they've experienced just an amazing sort of onslaught of confusion and worry and concern. And so we're there to really shore up the family so that they can be providing that kind of support. So in the next slide, I'm just going to say that in the next slide, I would say that families come to us having gone through so much, as I just mentioned. And the emotions on this slide are just the tip of the iceberg. And the reason I think it's important to bring up the emotions people have, because I think family clinicians are most effective if they can put themselves in the family's shoes, if they can kind of think about what it'd be like if they had gone through what the individual family's talking about, and to understand some of the things that the families come to tell us about. They often are feeling confused. They're often feeling helpless and hopeless. They might even be fearful that they can't keep their loved ones safe, or that they might, and I put this in quotations, they might do the wrong thing. That's a big worry of families everywhere. And they come to us oftentimes with exhaustion, because many of our clients have experienced symptoms for 1 to 2 years before they get help in a treatment program. So I'm just wondering, Kathy and Kurt, what would you say in terms of those emotions? Can you fill in some of your experience with these emotions?
Well, I thank you. It was bewildering to find your 21-year-old daughter who's been high functioning and her senior year in college is suddenly experiencing an array of confusing symptoms, and you just you're bewildered. You don't know what it is. You don't know how to help them. And also, I think you lose confidence in yourself as a mother and as a father. You feel like, well, she's off to a good start. She's about to launch. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it seems, she's just imploding. And you don't know why. And the symptoms are so varied. And you come in just feeling completely in shock and exhausted, and finding some people who will just listen to you and offer some knowing compassion or empathy, just listening. Listening is so important. That I found really, really helpful.
Well, yeah, with respect to the specific things you mentioned here on the slide, Susan, the first 3 of them, discouragement, confusion, feeling a loss of knowing what to do, all of them very much present to us right from the start. And the 3 of those things together, for me, led to the feeling of helplessness. And the more helpless I felt, the more hopelessness started to creep in, the thought that, is this going to ever get better? And then also fear about keeping Sophie safe. As time went on, at certain points, her behavior started to become potentially dangerous. And as that became the case, we thought, boy, we really need to keep our eye on her all the time, 24/7, which seemed impossible to do. And the more we tried, exhaustion does begin to set in, and you really need help. You really need help.
And I think now that I think about it, you're feeling a lot of anger at the situation. Anger at yourself, anger at your child, because you don't know what they're, you're so confused, you just get angry.
Yeah, and you're just so upset by it because you just do not want to believe that this is what your daughter's life is going to be like. If it stays like this, it's just so upsetting. Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy and Kurt. And I think I'm going to add anger to that slide. Is that, and that's something we as family education clinicians need to understand and be, empathetic with, is that it's natural to feel angry with the situation, with the lack of resources that you may have experienced, anger at yourself, and even anger at your child.
Yeah.
You don't feel good about that, but you can't help but feel, my gosh, what's going on here? Why can't you act differently?
Right.
Yeah. So when families go through these emotions and difficulties, we want to think about, what are they looking for? What is it we as a coordinated specialty care team should be thinking about providing? Because listening is very important, and being able to provide understanding and empathy to the families. But they also need some stuff to kind of work with, something that helps them know how to go forward, and helps them to be able to kind of sort through all the information that they find, say, online or in the newspapers, or the neighbor down the street tells you. It's like there's a lot of information coming at a person. And it's really helpful to have someone that you can go to that's got the facts. So we think information is important to provide. Also strategies. So like, what seems to help in this situation? What have other families done? What are some strategies for dealing with common scenarios that come up? It also seems to be extremely important that they feel like they've got some skills, that they came in not knowing stuff, knowing a lot. It's good when they can also feel like I know how I might be able to talk to my child. I know what are the early signs of relapse. I know a little bit about how to respond when someone's has a delusion or a belief system that seems totally outside of our own. I have some ideas about how to respond to that. So having the information, strategies, and skills along with the support seems to be a combination that almost all the coordinated specialty care teams are striving for. And Kurt and Kathy, how would do you agree with this, or?
Yes, yeah, I mean, the slide is short, but it's a lot of there's a lot in that slide. One piece about information in particular, when she was hospitalized twice, we had such a frustrating time getting information from the hospital clinicians, because I think because of HIPAA. And so we, could not really get anything from them. It was more from the Navigate program that we got more information. And, like for instance, information that I also found interesting was that there's a religious ideation that goes on in schizophrenia, because our daughter was thinking she was going to go to hell. She was thinking she was going to sell her soul to the devil. And, we both were theologically trained, and this was like horrifying for us because that was not our take. And so it was kind of incredibly ironic and baffling that she would go down this road. But finding out that was a kind of a trope and ideation in schizophrenia was very freeing. And we had no idea. So that's just one example of information that was helpful to know.
Thanks for that, Kathy. And I just also realized that feeling alone when you're just trying to deal with this on your own, without support, without someone to help and provide information, you don't know what's common and what's not common. You've probably had no idea that there were so many people who experienced psychosis, for example. That there's 3 out of 100 people in their lifetime will experience have an experience of psychosis, and 1 out of 100 will experience an episode of schizophrenia. And that kind of it's like people say, oh, it's not so 100% rare as I thought. And this religious ideation that my daughter has, other young people have had that too. There's something I think that's calm. It's not good news,
Right, right.
but it at least helps put things in perspective. Kurt, you look like you're going to say something.
No, just I guess with respect to this, Susan, I especially feel you're completely clueless when this first starts to happen. So all of these things are, I can't overstate how important they are, because you do feel clueless and you don't know other people, just like you're saying, you don't know other people who've gone through this. So you're both alone and clueless. And so again, I can't overstate how helpful it was once we finally got connected with Etch, with that program, to have people who have experience and who could help you in so many ways. Yeah.
And this slide goes into a little more detail. We're going to go into detail about two of those things. One is sort of the information and the strategies that most coordinated specialty care teams provide when they're working with families. And we'll just kind of briefly speak about these topic areas. And then I'd love to hear from Kathy and Kurt, which of these sort of were like really, really helpful, that they were able to apply. But certainly people are looking for facts. They're not looking for speculation. They're not looking for something sugar-coated or at the same time too distressing and discouraging. It's like, let's talk about the facts here. So facts about psychosis, like what are the symptoms? What is the definition of psychosis? What's an example of psychosis? How does it get diagnosed? What is, some of the theories about what might be contributing to psychosis? And what is the treatment about? So the second topic there would be medication being part of treatment. Most people have never heard of antipsychotic medications, and they don't know what they're, helpful for. They don't know, how long do you have to take them? Is it like a week until you start to feel better? Or is it something more long-term? So there's a lot of questions about medication, and rightfully so. Coping with stress is that this is an illness where that stress makes things worse. Stress tends to make symptoms worse and tends to make people struggle more. So learning how to cope with stress for yourself as a family, but also how do you help your loved one cope with stress? Fourth is alcohol and drugs. I wish it weren't so, but it's very widespread with first episode psychosis. When we did the research in the research initiative called RAISE, Recover After Initial Schizophrenia Episode, more than half of the clients who came to us with first episode had substance use disorders. So it's good to know, it's good to be educated about that, to know about that if you're a family member. Healthy lifestyles. The fifth one is like, what can we do to help with diet and exercise and sleep? Some of the things that can contribute to someone feeling better. But also with healthy lifestyles, especially with diet and exercise, it can help counteract the weight gain that is often a side effect of antipsychotic medication. Then in the second column, there's still some more topics like resiliency. How can you be aware of people's ability to bounce back and get back on track? How do you identify your own resiliency as a family member, your own strengths? And how do you help recognize your family, your loved ones' resiliency? Effective communication is something that we think is real helpful to families, like how to keep tension and stress low by how we communicate. And then wellness planning is looking to help people stay well. What are the things that most likely, learning what are the things that most likely cause symptoms to come back, being aware of that, and then what are the early warning signs, and then having a plan for what to do if you see early warning signs. And then finally, kind of some suggestions about how to work with mental health professionals, making sure that the family feels empowered to be part of the solution. You know, part of what we say, it takes a village. Well, definitely it takes a village and a whole country sometimes. But just being able to encourage families to interact with mental health professionals with assurance and to be able to advocate for their loved one. Now, that's a lot of different nuggets, so sorry about that. But I thought maybe Kathy and Kurt, you might be able to respond. How did some of these things help you? What are some examples?
In terms of effective communication and wellness,
Mm.
you know, it took a long time for us to learn that you don't try to reason with someone when they're having a delusion or a conspiracy thought. It just wouldn't work. But it was so frustrating to try to, you know, and it wasn't until we learned to, you know, without, complying with her thinking, to acknowledge that for her it was real. Now that's a huge skill to learn, and we took a long time, it seemed like, before we learned it, that skill.
Not there yet completely.
You know, I'll talk to some of my close friends and they'll say, well, just, you know, it's like, it's not that simple. So it's that was really helpful to be told that you acknowledge it. And it's so counterintuitive for a parent, because your goal is to, you know, teach them how to live their life.
You want to use logic.
Yeah, you want to use logic and reason, and that doesn't work. And that is a huge skill to have. And it's a delicate one, because you don't want, you know, it's a balance point right there. Is not giving them the sense that you are agreeing with that, but that you acknowledge that that's what they're experiencing. And that's a really finesse kind of skill.
It's a finesse. Yes, it is. You don't want to argue with the person, but at the same time, you don't want to agree that the thing they think is happening, because that would not be correct. It's not giving them correct information. Some people say to try to find what you can agree on, though, which is the feeling that it might give you.
Right.
Is that if you thought you're gonna the devil was gonna get you,
Right.
you can understand how that might be scary. Yeah. So that's very helpful. And Kurt, did you want to add one?
Yeah, you know, I do want to piggyback on that, because we spoke about anger as one of the emotions that you feel, and the frustration that I have felt. And I'm a lot better with it now than I used to be. But, you know, your instinct is to try to talk sense. And when that is completely futile, you feel so frustrated. And it led often to me feeling angry towards Sophie, like, come on, you know, get with it. This can't, you know. And so this, of all of them, that's probably the one that has been most important. The other, you know, learning about medication, because there's been different ones that she's been on over an extended period of time. And there was definitely a time, it's no longer an issue. We're very grateful for that. But when she insisted on stopping taking her antipsychotic medication, that led to big problems. So help with, if your loved one resists medication, how do you encourage them without nagging them? You know, that's a big deal. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And each of these, you know, these topics, and just encouraging the future family education treatment team members in the audience, is that there's information that you're providing, but you're always making it interactive. Is you want to hear how the family reacts to it. You want to hear what their experience has been. You want to hear what happens when they try something. It's never just like a lecture. Right. Okay, so the next thing is the examples when I was thinking of strategies. These are some examples of strategies or tips that families find helpful. It's nice because I've already heard from Kurt and Kathy which ones they found particularly helpful. For example, number 4, don't argue about worrisome thoughts or delusions. And encourage but don't nag. Those are I usually say those are easy to say and hard to do, right? Easy for us to say. But even the ones about being able to continue to do enjoyable things together, that's something that most families, they're so naturally wrapped up with what's going on that's so difficult, but being able to still do some things, even small, so that people can still enjoy themselves as a family. Also, it's important for families to take care of themselves. It can wear a person out. And sometimes families will stop taking care of themselves. They might not be getting the rest and the rejuvenation that they need because they're so devoted and so involved in trying to help their loved one. And then the last one is, if there's a crisis, reach out to us as a team, that the families really are there in the forefront. And we don't want them to be having to deal with stuff that they could get some help with, like crisis services, or calling up a team member, maybe having a meeting scheduled that wasn't being scheduled before. Let us help you, is what I would say. So anything else, Kathy and Kurt, about this?
Yeah. Well, the very first one is one that I've really needed help with all along the line, Susan. Keep expectations minimal at first. Don't let them all go. That's one thing that I've struggled with from the start. What are appropriate expectations given Sophie's particular condition? Because I've not wanted them to be too high. I've not wanted them to be too low. How do you find the right ones? And I mean, it is my own feeling that, especially as time goes on, there are some expectations that should be firm enough that if they're not met, there should be some sort of consequence that follows from it. And what should those consequences be? How should they follow? Big issue that I've always felt a real need for guidance on. So yeah.
Having some kind of household rules or household guidelines is important for every family. And often if there's not psychosis, those guidelines or rules are kind of unspoken, they're assumed. But when people develop psychosis, there needs to be more direct and clear. And it's hard. I completely agree with you, Kurt. Yeah. Okay.
And I just give an example of taking care of myself. You know, it's like 24/7, you're thinking about this loved one that is got a serious disease and it's affecting everybody. And one relief I found was I play tennis and I kept up with my regular tennis group. And because the 2 hours I'm playing tennis every other day, I didn't think about anything else. It was just on the court. And if people can find something that they enjoy doing that takes total focus and you forget for 2 hours or whatever what's going on at home, it was very helpful for me to keep a balance.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll just mention them well, no, it's okay. I can let it go. It's all right. It's all right.
Well, just to sort of have the slide about what is it that family members say that they appreciate. So if you're going to be the family clinician, it's good to know, I think, what it is that makes families feel comfortable, what makes them feel some relief. And so having that accurate information and the tips is helpful. In addition, the kindness and compassion that you show and convey is very important. It's like if someone could give you all the information in the world, but if they were cold about it, doesn't feel good. So being able to show kindness and compassion, staying calm, which is something Kathy and Kurt told me. It's like when you come in, you're all feeling all agitated. It's like the family clinician is calm. Okay, I think I can start calming down. Yeah. Good listening is something that Kathy's already mentioned. And then an appreciation for what they've gone through. That seems to help people feel more confidence. And then just the help with navigating through unfamiliar territory. This is all unfamiliar territory. And is there anything else that you might add to that, Kathy and Kurt?
I would just say that, you know, these qualities of kindness, compassion, and calmness, they may look really passive and feel passive to the person embodying them, but they are very powerful to know that person is really present to you. And you know, you feel like you're not doing anything by just listening and being there, but being a calm presence in the midst of parents and a family that have been traumatized, that is a big help.
Yeah, I mean, I'll second that. The listening part is huge, but then for me, the information and the tips and the strategies are equally important. I mean, you really, I've all along wanted to be listened to really well with respect to the specifics of our situation with Sophie, and, you know, have that listening be kind, compassionate, calm, all that. But I also all the time really wanted specific guidance too. The good information, the specific strategies and tips, both of them really important to me.
Okay. And just the last slide is just to kind of leave you with the idea that it's natural that families feel alone and confused about what to do. That is completely understandable and natural. And what you're providing as family clinicians is a setting, in a way, sort of like a holding, a place where people can feel held. And they can be fully honest about what's going on and recognize they're not alone. Also, it's just important to value your role, is that it may be challenging at times, but what you're doing is helping folks who might otherwise feel lost have a sense about what to do and where to go. And you're providing hope, and that can't be underestimated. So I'm just kind of thinking that we have a few minutes for questions. I'd love to, Kathy and Kurt, would it be okay if we move to that?
Sure.
And I know that people have been keeping track of the questions.
Yeah, some really good participants in the chat in this webinar. It's been rocking. So I will do my best.
We didn't know, did we, Kathy and Kurt?
No, you guys are really
box.
inspiring. A lot of comments and ideas. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go back up to my list to see. So we have lots and lots of folks were commenting on self-care and the importance of self-care and ways in which they encourage families that they're working with and for themselves to engage in self-care, and including listening to music and meditation practices. One question I got, what are some examples of useful information for families about working with mental health providers? So any tips that you have for families about working with mental health providers that you want to share?
Well, I think we were extremely fortunate to connect with the people that we have worked with a long time. The ETCH program, Navigate program, Kathy Adams and the other people there. We always felt extremely supported by them, and that they were very responsive to us. Always, I felt. The difficulty we had was when Sophie and Kathy brought this up, when Sophie needed to be hospitalized, which they were 30 to 40 day hospitalizations 3 different times. And we felt mostly in the dark then. And that was not good. That was difficult for us.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
when we were working with ETCH, the coordinated care team, we felt like we were definitely in the loop, and we met with them regularly. So that was huge. But so any advice that can be given to folks is to, I mean, is that common if a person is hospitalized, that you're not going to get as much because of HIPAA? We just didn't know, but it was difficult there not to feel like we were being in the loop. Yeah.
So I think given that, what the suggestion we might say is is for families to recognize they do have a right, that they're not being out of place or out of line to be asking these things, and to continue to ask and to continue. And that's really frustrating, I'm sure, as a family member. But is that you are valuable, and what your support is going to make all the difference. So that's why you have to kind of keep in there and keep asking.
So you have to
And
be
I
an
wish,
advocate. Yeah,
For yourselves, I guess.
yeah.
that's not
yeah.
easy to do sometimes.
Oh, no, it's not.
A whole psychiatric team at the hospital, no one's
Yeah.
giving you any information. You're like,
You're wondering, yeah.
so
Well, we thought we were asking questions, but it's not very forthcoming, so.
Right.
Not forthcoming, yeah.
Thanks so
well,
much. Another good question that was in the chat was about any ideas of what might be helpful if the team is finding that it's hard to engage the family, hard to connect with the family. And I wonder, Susan, your thoughts on both on engaging the family, but also for Kurt and Kathy, your thoughts about, what might be some of the reasons, that you might, think about, or things that might kind of lead to making it hard, just to kind of make sure, we're thinking about, all the factors that can influence engagement.
Uh-huh. Are you suggesting, Michelle, maybe what are some of the reasons that families might find it difficult to engage with the team? Yeah.
Yeah. And then, thoughts about what might help.
well, we were fortunate in that we have a good relationship with our daughter. So we weren't, she hadn't gotten to the point where the family's so exhausted they don't want to deal with them anymore. And I know that happens. And so when you have that, I don't have an answer. I don't know how to do that. The other thing I think is the family is the stigma of it. They don't want to address the fact that this is happening and kind of being in denial. And I don't know how to fix that either. So I mean, that's a good question. I don't.
Well, I'll say with respect to that, I mean, if people are concerned that engaging with the team will somehow lead to this whole situation becoming more public beyond the family, and there's a concern about being stigmatized for it, our experience, very thankfully, has been that when we've told others, we've been overwhelmed by how supportive people have been, and how they also almost invariably talk about their own family members who also have serious mental health challenges. And that has been a real boon to us. And so if that's a problem for folks, if they're worried about that, my thought is
the opposite might happen.
The opposite might be the case. You may want a lot more people to know about what's going on.
Right. Well, I guess and the question is well-founded, is that it's not everyone, not all families jump at the chance to be involved in the program. And Michelle's right to bring up that there's a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes they're exhausted. They may have had all kinds of things happen as a result of their loved one's illness, and they're just depleted.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes families this is one of the many crises that are going on for them. They may have financial problems. They may have somebody in the family who has a physical illness. They may have an elderly parent that's living at home. They may have all kinds of things going on. It's sort of like how to show that. And then for each of these things, that dictates how you might want to reach out. So is there anything we could help the family with that they're struggling with? Like maybe that they have an elderly parent living at home. Would they like to know about resources for caretakers for the elderly? If they're being threatened with eviction, do they know of can we connect them with legal aid societies? Usually it's finding out what is the most important to that family, and trying to meet that need is a way to help the family feel like, well, these guys want to help us. They want to get us to be stronger, to get our strength back, kind of. And also to convey hope to the families is another thing. They are often feeling discouraged. That's why they're not responding. But there's I could go on for way too long. But I think it's our job as family clinicians to figure out how to make that connection. It's not the family's job to somehow miraculously not feel exhausted or miraculously not have these other problems. Like, we have to figure out how to get and make that connection with the families. That's on us.
Thanks, Susan. I think that's such a good point. And I think it's important. Family clinician, they need to earn the trust of the family. It's their job to understand them. Xiomara, I want to give you a chance for a reward for bravery of asking a question directly. Do you want to go ahead?
And I was just thinking a thought, because a lot of times we have all this education, and as clinicians, we're educated in this field and we're taught to behave and feel and all these different things. And sometimes there are certain barriers that not only patients, but families actually go through. And we have those barriers as well. Being honest with ourselves, self-evaluation, self-assessment constantly can help us to be more fine-tuned with what we're hearing and seeing. Make sure they're incongruent with each other and able to address the need at that point. And knowing what some of those barriers may be in certain locations or areas. Because some parents will raise, you don't air your dirty laundry, you don't bring my business out in public and things like that. So that's stigmas. That's really hard to break down, but it takes time and a lot of education, but compassion goes with it.
Thank you. Such a good point. There's so many good things in the chat. I'm going to propose we go a little bit longer than we originally planned, if it's okay for you guys. Thumbs up. Okay, so we can get to folks. We'll go to more like 2:55. So also, someone very wise sent me a message saying that a lot of these questions can become entire webinars.
Yes, that is exactly right.
I think our next series might be just on families, because this is such an important topic.
Yeah.
So let's see. There was a question about hope specifically. Let me see if I can find that question. I don't think I found it. Well, I'll go back. What I'm seeing closer is any tips for engaging families, or what folks should think about if the kind of the person who's getting the service in the family is saying they don't want their families involved and they're an adult.
Yeah, if they're over, sometimes it's in many states, it's if they're over 18. Some states, it's even if they're over 16. They can say they don't want their families involved. And we have to respect that, but we don't leave it at that. Let me put it that way, is that oftentimes they're refusing to have their families involved because they don't really know what we would be what we'll be doing with the families. Are we going to just criticize them, criticize the person? Are we going to pick on them? Are they going to, plot against the person? They don't know what we're going to do. So making sure they get a chance to meet the family clinician, maybe to talk to the peer specialist on the team about how families can help, how maybe it helped in their position and in their situation. And to be thinking about the ways that a person might, the client themselves might see what benefits could they see. If I usually think of it as how would it be helpful if your family understood more about what you were going through and how hard it is. And that's often appealing to the person. I think all of us want to feel understood, and the client would want to feel understood. And then also to say, you're going to be in charge of this to the client, is how much you want to share in those meetings. And we will absolutely value your privacy and not talk about things you don't want us to talk about. But the value that most people find with having the client is is it becomes something they can talk about with their family. It's often, if you had asthma, or if you had another kind of physical disease, you'd be talking about the asthma. And if the symptoms flared up, you talk about it with your family. With psychosis, sometimes people don't talk to each other, the family and the client. So it provides an opportunity to be able to talk to each other. So figuring out, again, what is it that would be appealing to the client about this is important, I think.
And, this kind of goes back to the other issue of why people don't come in, why families don't come in. And I think partly sometimes families might feel indicted that this has happened. They might feel that they were the cause of this. So that goes back to information that, that's not your burden, and to not feel like it's going to be a threat and an indictment over the family system in itself, but that this can be seen as a completely new light, might help them see this as being involved is a benefit rather than a guilt feeling.
Some clients, by the way, also think they don't want to be a burden to their family.
Right.
They don't want to have their families have to come to meetings, or they don't want to have their families, they've been through enough already.
Right.
And in fact, it's a relief to families to be involved for the most part, but that's not necessarily what the client sees at the beginning.
So thank you for those who brought me back to the hope question. The question is, I know that hope is an important factor for family engagement. For Kathy and Kurt, was there anything you heard or experienced that made you feel hopeful again?
Oh, that's good.
Well, we're currently taking an online course about psychosis. And the professor, who's Scottish, was saying one of the first things, there's several different pods, or learning pods, but that came right out in a very gentle, calm Scottish brogue, saying, we expect them to get better right off the bat. And I'd never heard a professional say that.
Wow.
And that's the default now, that they're going to get better. And then he backs it up by this whole course. And so, even if there's not a cure, there's at least this hope that they can live a life that's meaningful, that you as a family can live a life that's meaningful. So that was really, because people have told us that in the past, but it's hard to have hope when you're feeling so dismal about everything. But to have someone like him come out and say that is the new expectation, is that they will get better with all this kind of care and concern and support. So that was helpful.
That was helpful.
And to read stories of recovery that have been, people really do get better, and to have those specific stories and to talk to people. I met one person in particular at a church that I'm working with who is herself schizophrenic, has schizophrenia, and I would have never known. She got treatment beginning a long time ago, and I would never, ever have known that she herself has schizophrenia because she's gotten so much better. And we've seen Sophie get a lot better.
Yeah.
As time goes on, she's getting a lot better.
And my sister was flying through the Boston airport a couple of years ago during March, and she said the whole airport was filled with big signs of people with, I think it was National Mental Illness Month, big signs of all these professionals who are living with serious mental diseases, but what they're doing. I don't know if any of you saw that in the Boston airport, but she said it was so moving for her that they, this desire to educate the populace at large about, look, these old stigmas about what it means is no longer true.
That's right. That's right. Well, I think some people also say that having the peer specialist talk to them about how things used to be and how things are now. That's been helpful. For many people, the peer specialist is a living example of hope. Things can and do get better. So I think that's. We got demoted all of a sudden.
No, it wasn't meant to be at all. Sorry about that. There are so many good things being talked about. I just want to thank all of our just wonderful, wonderful presenters. Let's give them a huge round of applause as well, virtual applause and in-person applause. And I want to just give a quick plug. Our next installment of
Yeah,
this
please
series will
do.
be on July 7th. We have Dr. Mhttc Keshavan, Nate Shririan, and Charles Strohmeyer IV, who will be talking about medication management. The recording for this webinar will be up on our website, hopefully within a week, and we'll share the slides as well. And we'll really put some serious thought. If we didn't get to your question, we do have it recorded, and we will be thinking about maybe some future programming where we come back to some of these topics, because I think they're very, very good ones. And just want to thank you all tremendously for your time and generosity.
Thanks,
Thank
Michelle.
you.
Thank you. Pleasure for us.
Thank you all for attending today's webinar. You'll be receiving an evaluation form right afterwards through email. We also have a few upcoming events, which Michelle just talked about. Please feel free to register if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye all.
Bye, everyone.